Welcome to the very last PFF forecast of February. It is February 28th. We've got a good one here because we've done our first mock draft. It's a doozy. Some might say it's the best mock draft that's ever been done for 2021. It's sensational, bunch of trades, a lot of fun. And we're going to talk about win totals for the AFC North. Let's rock. All right. We're going to get to the mock, but I have to ask you. I just have to ask you. What's your read on Russell Wilson not demanding a trade, but putting out there, hey, here are 4 teams I would go to. If I could do it, this is how I would do it. It's very like O.J. Simpson book title-y.
Dude, I don't know. I think he knows he's smart. Like, look, he's somewhere between smart enough to understand that the Seahawks can't really trade him and not smart enough to understand like self-awareness on social media. So like he's in that like region.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what he's trying to do obviously is to get people riled up with the Seattle Seahawks. And kind of try to move the needle a little bit there. I don't know how much he's going to be able to accomplish, but I think he's certainly unhappy, but he probably does know that demanding a trade is not – he's going to look like an idiot because they're not going to trade him because of the dead money that they'll have to incur by letting him go.
Yeah, it's weird because that makes sense. And that's what everyone's saying. Oh, yeah, he wants them to go get him some help and all this stuff. But I just wonder if this is the most passive-aggressive trade demand in history. Because you said exactly what I was thinking about Russell Wilson, which is like Russell Wilson is over here and you're right. He like wants to be in the media. He's put on a podcast. He's doing all this different stuff with Ciara. And yet he like would be the guy that would go passive aggressive on a trade demand.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's very interesting. He also picked places, Chicago, New Orleans, Dallas, and Las Vegas, all of which are either bigger cities or like New Orleans is the weird one because it's not like a mecca of media or industry, but it would be a place where, he would be like a Super Bowl contender immediately. So I could see that being a thing, but I don't know. It was weird to me because like if you want Seattle to get you some help at this point, isn't that just a conversation with you in Seattle? Like it doesn't make any sense for me to leak these.
But don't you think he's had these conversations before? So like this is like the disgruntled
which is why I think this is like the most passive aggressive trade demand of all time.
But he's probably been nice about it in private to the team before, and they've probably assured him that they would do better. And they never really they did trade for Dwayne Brown one year mid-season. Mm-hmm. They did. Drafting Metcalf was sort of like a lucky thing. They've never really gone. They went out and got Josh Gordon a couple times, but that didn't really work out. I think part of the issue is obviously Seattle hasn't surrounded him with greatness, but it's not that they haven't tried. I just don't know if they've tried hard enough.
They traded 2 1s for Jamal Adams. We're going to talk about that in our mock draft here, the Jets.
Yeah.
Those things, those are moves. I don't know. It's so weird for him to say that. It's like, this was the best analogy that I saw. I think this was Ryan Russillo said, I'm happy with my wife, but if I were to leave her for another woman, here are the 4 that I would leave her for.
But he's more like liking their Instagrams than he is like, actually
actually making any moves,
making a pass at them or something like that. Like that's kind of how, like, I don't know, chicken shit seems a bit aggressive, but it does seem a little less than like the full on demanding there. But I don't know.
What's the move then that Seattle makes? So let's say Seattle goes, okay, we're going to make a move. What's the best move for them to make, assuming they're going to keep Russell Wilson, right? What's the best move to make him happy?
Yeah, that's a great question because, Seattle's about $4 million under the cap, and we don't know exactly what the cap is. you have, Lockett's like their easiest, their easiest savings actually, and he's one of Wilson's best targets. But and Dunlap, obviously they could get out from under him for 14 million. That does seem like a fairly straightforward move. So, I think you have to go out and, because they don't have a first round draft pick, I think you have to go out and try to acquire a lot of players in free agency. Unfortunately, because of where they're at, it might have to be like the Adam Humphries situation, or it might have to be like Corey Davis might be the ceiling of what they can do at wide receiver and free agency, and then obviously offensive line. But you're never really getting the bang for your buck on the offensive line, and they've been absolutely atrocious drafting it since Wilson's been there. So I don't know. That's a good question. I think if you're a Niners, Rams, or Arizona Cardinals fan, I think you're fairly happy about the situation, because it doesn't look like the Seahawks are going to be able to reach his demands.
Okay, I've got one for you. A little cap gymnastics needed for this, but you could probably get Odell Beckham Jr. to come over and play with Russ and that group. I think it would be a really cool compliment to DK Metcalf. On the flip side of him and Baker, like where he's really the alpha there, and it clearly didn't work out, I think it's obvious what he'd be coming into in Seattle, and it'd be his last chance, So he should be willing to make any sacrifice he can if he gets to play with a guy like Russell Wilson. That's the move that I think should be made, or they should try and explore, to kind of make Russ happy. But I also think, it's a gamble, yeah, but it could make them a ridiculously good offense if OBJ is like 80% of his prime at some point.
Yeah. The hard part is, do you keep everything else fixed? Their defense was so awful in the first half of the year, but in they ended up being a decent defense in the second half of the year. They're not a complete team. They never really have been with Russ there. I worry about continuing to kick the can down the road as far as, the talent there. So that would be my concern, but obviously that doesn't make Wilson happy. That's really the rub right now with some of these teams that have elite caliber talent at the quarterback position, is, you have to win now, but you also can't leave the team in such dire straits, if things fail to where, and this is an extreme case, but you get to a Deshaun Watson situation where, they tried to win now with all the trades, with the Tunzel trade and so on. But then they failed, and then they're left, irritating their quarterback further on. So that's really a tough one. I don't envy Seattle's position here.
You're talking about completeness. They need a running game, so hopefully they can go out and make that happen.
So, well, they got Carlos Hyde, former Niner, last year.
All right, it is time to mock. Our mock is going to be up tomorrow morning.
Let me just put it this way, George. Think to yourself of what your favorite mock is, and then realize that you're about to level up.
This is the mock your previous mock told you not to worry about. It's fantastic. We had a ton of fun doing this. Remember, this is how we would draft if we were drafting for all 32 teams. So there's some uniqueness here. It's not trying to predict what teams will take, but it led to some really interesting conversations. You can read the full thing at pff.com. What we're going to do here is we're going to go pick by pick. I'm going to read 5 picks at a time. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about the ones that were in those groups that were kind of the most hotly debated, or we thought were the most interesting. And we'll go through it that way. Are you ready?
I'm ready, George.
Okay. I will preface this first 5 by saying we call this the schmock because of what happens at number 2, the art schmock. Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers make a big move. So at 1, Jacksonville takes Trevor Lawrence. At 2, we have Carolina trading up with the New York Jets and selecting Zach Wilson. At number 3, we have a big trade again. Houston trades with Miami. They get their pick back. So they send Deshaun Watson to Miami. They recoup number 3, number 18. They get Xavier Howard, and they get Tua Tagovailoa. Remember that one, because that comes up later. Houston then selects Justin Fields. So quarterback. Atlanta at number 4 takes Jamar Chase, creates potentially the greatest trio of wide receivers that we have in the NFL with Julio, Ridley, and Chase. And then at number 5, Cincinnati doesn't have to be mad at us because Chase is gone. So they take Penei Sewell. Your biggest reaction to these first 5?
Well, there's a number of teams that could trade up with 2 or 3. So the fact that we picked Carolina and we picked Houston, I think sort of shows sort of where our heads are at. Carolina, I think if you are Matt Rule, if you are Joe Brady, if you are the new look Panthers, I think you see blood in the water in the NFC South, despite the fact that somebody in your division just literally won the Super Bowl. Atlanta hasn't been, Atlanta's in transition yet again. New Orleans, in theory, will be in transition again. And, Tampa Bay, they have an older quarterback. So you can come up, get your quarterback, get him a year with Joe Brady. We wrote this about Herbert. Like, there's a chance that you draft Wilson, he plays really well as a rookie. Joe Brady gets a head coaching job as a result, and maybe it's not as good of an outcome as you think. But yeah, that to me, that's a swing for the fence there. I like that one a lot. The Sewell one obviously is just sort of looking at the tackle market if you're Cincinnati and looking at what you're going to need to have to put together if you want to protect Joe Burrow in year 2 after you did such a horrible job of doing it in year 1.
I really struggled with the Sewell pick because the wide receiver core for the Bengals is not great, and I know that we like T. Higgins, his potential. I guess he had some moments last year, and you love Tyler Boyd. Okay. But Tyler Boyd is, a really good number 2 or a pretty good number 2. But you need to get more weapons there in Cincinnati. I'll say this about the Zach Wilson thing. I think it's the perfect move for Carolina. And the reason I think it's the perfect move for Carolina is you mentioned both the Falcons and the Bucs. The Falcons are going to give it one last go here. Okay. They've got Arthur Smith. They've got Matt Ryan, got Julio Jones. And the Bucs are, 2-3 years, however many years Tom Brady decides to keep being superhuman. So why would Carolina not right now build for the future? And here's the other thing. You expect the team to get better next year. They have pick 8 this year. That may be the ceiling in terms of how high they can get because you expect their team to improve. Then they can ship Teddy Bridgewater to the Bears and the Bears can continue being the Bears.
Right. Yeah, I think the thing with the Bengals is just, to get starting, the bet on getting starting caliber left tackle play in free agency is just so much worse than in the current wide receiver crop. If you lose out on Chase, you can still go Waddle or Smith, as we're going to talk about, but you can, there's some veteran guys that I think can mix in there at the 3rd spot behind Higgins and Boyd.
I have to say this too. I feel really bad for Justin Fields. Justin Fields did nothing to deserve going to Houston. And this is not us hating on Justin Fields. We both were 100% Justin Fields is number 3 guy. No conversation about the other 2. Okay. Number 6, Philadelphia Eagles select Devontae Smith. Detroit Lions at 7 take Jalen Waddle. The Jets, who moved back from 2 to 8, take Kyle Pitts, tight end Florida. At number 9, the Broncos go quarterback and take Trey Lance from North Dakota State. And then Dallas at 10 takes cornerback number 1, Caleb Farley. Were you looking back at these 6, which was the one that you think we might be most close to changing if we were to do this again?
Well, obviously the Pitts selection comes with the idea that they're either keeping Darnold or they're getting Bridgewater back. Remember, the Jets had Bridgewater in Darnold's first year. But that one is interesting. It's they don't have good wide receivers in New York. I mean, Jamison Crowder was the best they had. Perriman, Mims is a draft pick. So those 2, Pitts kind of comes in there into an offense that, needs wide receiver play, but the top 3 are plucked away. So you get him in there. He's a unique talent. If he doesn't perform, and we've seen that happen before, top 10 tight ends are, worse than a coin flip, then the choice to forego one of the top quarterbacks in favor of Darnold or Bridgewater or something like that is going to blow up in the Jets' face.
Yeah. Here's the one that, looking back on this, I was like, maybe we do this differently. Should the Eagles, if Lance and Jones are there, not consider taking one of them? I mean, they're in a situation where you want to see what Jalen Hurts has, but you also don't want to miss out on having the 6th overall pick. Now, they're such a bad team that there's a chance they're picking top 5 again next year, so I think that plays into the calculus. And Devonta Smith is so good and offers them a really great complement to what they have with Jalen Reagor. So I'm at peace with it. But part of me wonders, like, would you just take Trey Lance and give he and Jalen Hurts like every other series and just see who wins? I mean, the Eagles are in such a shitty position here that you're almost like willing to take, you take one quarterback here and you're willing next year, if you have a top 5 pick, to take another one.
Well, in my first, in my draft, we both kind of did these independently, came together on a consensus. I had the Eagles moving up to 3. Mm-hmm. In hindsight, I think that was actually kind of stupid because, the Eagles need a lot of players.
Yes.
They're not a good enough football team. They're kind of like the Jets were in 2018 when they moved from 6 to 3 to take Darnold. And it's like, you're just setting that guy up to fail. I think you're doing the same thing if you take Lance there too, because for one, Lance is not a polished, like Lance is going to take some work, right? Mm-hmm. And that's fine. Like if you believe Hurts is like sort of the backup of the future, quote unquote, that's fine. But why don't you just take a stab at the idea that he's the starter of the present, knowing that you went wide receiver in round 1 last year, going wide receiver in round 1 again. You're sort of building that team up, and if you absolutely flame out, 6 is probably like the upper bound of where you're going to pick next year.
A couple other things on these picks. I think they're really interesting. Denver, everyone says, oh, look, they want to give Drew Lock another shot. Go pick up the quarterback annual. Take a look at Drew Lock. There's no reason to give Drew Lock another shot. Like if you want him to compete, that's fine, but you cannot go away from picking a quarterback or trading for a quarterback because you think Drew Lock has something in him that you haven't seen yet. That's just ridiculous. And if he proves you wrong, great, you're set, you're fine. But
Drew Lock is fan fiction at this point.
But I do want to take a second and talk about the Dallas Cowboys here. What we came into a couple of times is, look, if we're the GM for a team, we are not going to shy away from taking a position that we drafted highly last year and maybe didn't work out again this year. And so when you look at Caleb Farley, you go, oh, they just took Trayvon Diggs and like he was okay. He was actually their highest rated corner last year. He didn't eclipse 65. They need corners. You need corners. Look at the Bucs. Look at the Bucs.
Corner's a depth position. Corner's a depth position, and it doesn't always pay. Like if you took Jeffrey Okudah last year, Jeff Gladney last year, Christian Fulton was okay, I think. But then if you took Trayvon Diggs, like that pick wasn't. Those picks weren't to light the league on fire in year 1. Those picks were to do what Tampa did in Carlton Davis's year 3, right? To sort of be like, oh, this is why we attacked the secondary 3 drafts ago, with relentless abandon, because now we have a bunch of guys that are rounding into form. If you take a cornerback in year 1 in the draft and expect him to be everything to you, you failed. And I think that the same thing's true here with Farley, who I think is the best cornerback prospect and has been for a calendar year. But he's going to be a part of a thing in Dallas. If you put it on his shoulders, I think that's not a good way to think about it.
My favorite set of 5 picks is 11 through 15. Okay. Because I was in the shower this morning and I was thinking about our podcast and I was thinking about what
as one does.
Yes, as one does. And I was thinking about what pick do I regret most? And the only thing I regret was the Niners not making a move for either Deshaun Watson or Zach Wilson. But we can't jinx it, Eric. We cannot jinx it. We cannot put that in this mock or any other mock. The Niners are staying pat until, here we go. The New York Giants at 11 take edge defender numero uno from Michigan, Kwity Paye. And at 12, the Niners, they're on the clock. The Washington football team gives them a call and trades up with the Niners to select Mac Jones. The Niners are happy to stick with Jimmy G for now. At number 13, the Los Angeles Chargers take offensive tackle Rashawn Slater. At 14, your Minnesota Vikings solidify the interior of their defense, which they so desperately need.
The next John Randall.
With Christian Barmore. And at number 15, perhaps our favorite move, Houston trades Tua Tagovailoa, who they picked up earlier in the round, to New England for New England's pick at 15. And Houston then picks Asante Samuel Jr. Houston actually, despite the fact that we can't really stand what they're doing as an organization, is doing a really nice job in our mock draft. At least that was my takeaway here. What was the biggest, what was your favorite part of this 11 through 15?
Well, the 201 was clear. I mean, the Barmore thing is interesting. Obviously, we wrote the article about, how valuable interior defenders are that have value beyond just stopping the run, even if they can't get pushed. Now, Barmore's so above and beyond expectation at his position right now. And the interior players are getting paid a ton now. That snatching a guy who can be elite at pick 13 or 14 is actually a fairly good value for the dollar. So that one, that would not have been in our mock last year. That's in our mock now. But yeah, to me, it's the Tua, trading back in. In essence, you get 5 quarterbacks in round one. Here, New England gets a guy that I think will be, fairly good if you surround him with some talent and they have the cap space to do so. There really isn't anybody for a New England team at 15 that's going to change the direction of their franchise other than Tua Tagovailoa.
Now, here's the sneaky thing about what Houston has done. They've gotten Justin Fields, but they've also now started to create kind of a sneaky good, defensive secondary on the defensive side, where they picked up in our trade, they picked up Xavier Howard and now have Asante Samuel Jr. So, they could turn this around rather quickly if Justin Fields is anything close to what Deshaun Watson was for them. And, they don't deserve it, but they're getting it here. I'll also say that for the Washington football team, I think this is a really interesting choice in Mac Jones, that they could try and run it back with Alex Smith, whether he wants to play or not. But I really like getting a quarterback who can throw the ball accurately, especially over the middle of the field, which is what he did at Alabama. Given that they've got Terry McLaurin there, I think you've got to give Terry someone and then go maybe out in free agency and sign another wide receiver. And all of a sudden, if Mac Jones comes in and plays anything around average quarterback play, you're going to be a pretty darn good football team. And maybe it turns out that he, continues to progress and it's not just all the Alabama offense. They could be really good. Like, they could win the NFC East if Mac Jones is decent.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the NFC East, of course, being being what it is. But yeah, absolutely. And that's an interesting one where I think, when I'm sort of looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, that's really Washington's only recourse. He kind of reminds me of Kirk Cousins. Now, the interesting thing is Cousins went 4th round in 2012. You're having to trade up to get Jones with pick 12 here. But if the outcomes are the same, the price is pretty low for the quarterback like that. So, yeah.
Going to pick number 16, the Arizona Cardinals at 16 take Patrick Surtain Jr., replacing Patrick Peterson, who's been so fantastic for them for so long. At 17, the Raiders go Rashad Bateman, who tweeted out that he ran sub 4.4, which was pretty impressive.
You love to see it.
At 18, Houston via Miami takes Azeez Ojulari, edge defender from Georgia. At 19, the Niners, who just moved back from 12, take J.C. Horn, cornerback. Was working out with Jalen Ramsey this past weekend, and a guy that Richard Sherman has talked about really liking. So they maybe get the replacement for Sherman there. And then at 20, the Bears take Christian Darrisaw, offensive tackle, who could have easily been taken ahead of Rashawn Slater. He projected even slightly better from a pressure rate allowed standpoint than Rashawn Slater. What was your favorite pick here?
I like the Horn pick. The Bateman pick is also great. It's again an example of a team taking a guy at a position one year and not shying away another year, especially a position like wide receiver where we know you need depth there. They just got rid of Tyrell Williams, who they signed to a big deal, who did not work out. Horn is another one too. Like, the Niners need cornerback play. We wish they would have gone and gotten it during last year's draft, but in the first rounds or so. But they didn't, and that that's what happens. But I like that pick a lot. He's one that always pops up in my projections, our projection.
I really like the Raiders going and getting Bateman. If you're going to try and compete in that division with the Chargers,
you might have the worst quarterback eventually.
Right. With the Chargers and Herbert and that offense looking on the come up, and then the Broncos, potentially they could make a move at quarterback. And then of course you have the Chiefs. You go, well, what do I need? I need an explosive offense. I think if you're going to go in on Derek Carr, you've got to give him weapons. And Bateman is, I mean, if you miss on Ruggs or if Ruggs develops, Bateman figures to help either way, right? Because Ruggs can be that speed element. And Bateman obviously is no slouch himself. I really like that move for the Raiders. Okay. 21, the Indianapolis Colts take Trayvon Mooring, safety. Tennessee at 22 takes Gregory Rousseau from Miami. 23, the Jets get a receiver for Sam Darnold, another receiver. So they go Kyle Pitts and then Rondale Moore. And then at 24, the Pittsburgh Steelers take offensive weapon Kadarius Toney, Florida. And then the Jags, who had this pick from the Seahawks for Jamal Adams, take offensive tackle USC Elijah Vera Tucker. Favorite pick here?
I like the Rondale Moore pick. I think that gives whomever is playing quarterback for the Jets a fighting chance. The Rousseau pick is more of a need than anything, but he's also a very good athlete. Sat out this year though. Is one where you're making a projection. Indianapolis Trayvon Mooring is is an Indianapolis pick. So all of these sort of make sense. My favorite, I think, is Rondale Moore. Give the quarterback that you never really gave a fighting chance. Give him a fighting chance.
You know what my favorite pick is? It's obviously Kadarius Toney, and I am a sucker for athleticism. Toney can score from anywhere, but it should be noted he did really well on the few deep targets that he did get. He's still really raw, but I love what this does either for extending Ben Roethlisberger's career or for whoever the next quarterback is there. Because you look at his heat maps that you can see in the PFF draft guide, and Toney just lights up the middle of the field. And that is where Big Ben is going to be needing to throw the ball because he threw it in an average of 2.2 seconds last season. So I think it fits really well for extending Ben Roethlisberger's career and making the Steelers' offense kind of, electric, which is what it could be if Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool continue to improve. So I really like that for the Pittsburgh Steelers, regardless of who the quarterback is. Okay. The last set here, we're going to go 26 through 32. The Cleveland Browns, Micah Parsons, linebacker / edge rusher. He's a freak. The Baltimore Ravens at 27 take offensive tackle Tevin Jenkins. At 28, New Orleans. This is kind of a surprise for a lot of people, but it might be one of my favorite picks. Terrence Marshall Jr., wide receiver, LSU. Green Bay Packers, receiver? No. They're going defense. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. At number 30, the Buffalo Bills take Jason Away in a manger. 31, the Kansas City Chiefs take wide receiver Elijah Moore. And 32, the Tampa Bay Bucks make a strength even stronger with Ardarius Washington, safety / slot defender from TCU. Your Chiefs going wide receiver.
I think you have to. I mean, at the tackle, there's a ton of tackle, options later on. I think you make what is kind of, sneakily a strength, another strength here. But they were followed by the fact that, when it mattered most in the Super Bowl last year, they struggled, in the sort of secondary, tertiary wide receiver position with Sammy Watkins being slowed and Mecole Hardman sort of not having quite emerged from, his sort of gadget position. They need a wide receiver to complement Tyreek Hill, and they've needed one for a while. And to me, that's how you do it. And there's also a sneaky thing here, George, which is when you have a superstar quarterback, I think you have to get out ahead of what Russell Wilson's complaining about what Deshaun Watson's complaining about. Like, you're in it for the long haul with Mahomes, but I think you have to continue to make him happy.
I couldn't decide what my favorite picks in this section were. So I have two and they tie. The New Orleans Saints taking Terrence Marshall Jr., who is going to suffer from even more than what Justin Jefferson suffered from. He played in the slot a ton. That was obviously a question mark for Justin Jefferson, but he also dealt with the bad side of the LSU team, right? And Justin Jefferson had that incredible season with Joe Burrow. Terrence Marshall gets nowhere near that opportunity. 150 plus pass rating on throws, 10 plus yards downfield, 6'3", dude is an absolute freak. and you think about Jameis Winston, who wants to push the ball downfield. I think Marshall will be able to play in the slot and a little bit out wide. And you've got obviously Michael Thomas there already. So I think this gives Jameis Winston, Sean Payton a chance to be electric. And then our Darius Washington, slot defender / safety from TCU. The dude's like 5'8", but he's an absolute maniac. Incredible instincts. I loved what Michael Renner wrote about him in the draft guide. Said, like, if he were 6 feet tall, he'd be a top 10 pick. Gives a little honey badger vibe, which you love. And if you look at what the Tampa Bay Bucks have done, they have invested in receivers and defensive backs. It has paid off for them. They continue to do that. Jason Licht continuing to be the best drafter, as Timo Riske wrote on PFF.com last week. That's our mock. You can go check it out on PFF.com. You can go hate on it on Twitter or in the comment section. We enjoy it. Anything that you have, throw it our way. And we'll have version 2 in maybe a month or so before the draft.
Yeah.
Okay. Last thing we're going to do for the podcast today is we're going to keep guessing the win totals. Win totals have not been released yet. There are division odds out. We don't know if there's going to be a 17th game or not. We are doing.
So we're assuming 16 games for the peanut gallery, by the way.
We are doing the AFC North, a fun division to talk about here. And I want to preface this by saying I had to go look up. I almost wanted to guess the division odds because I wasn't quite sure what they would be. So I went on DraftKings.com. The Ravens plus 105, the Browns plus 175, the Steelers plus 375, and the Bengals 25-1. And I thought that was interesting because when I then looked at my predictions for what the win totals would be, I guess I was kind of right in that assumption. Did those lines surprise you at all?
They did, although they don't. Like when you think about, I think Pittsburgh's the one that surprises the most people, mm-hmm. right? And I'm not surprised by Pittsburgh, not having a high projection. And in fact, I concur with that, just given, sort of gestures and everything regarding the Steelers.
Mm-hmm. The Steelers, by the way, second in EPA per play allowed on defense, something that, is not particularly sticky. They also, of course, had the offensive regression towards the end of the season. Let's start with Pittsburgh. What did you have Pittsburgh's 2021 win total being?
7.5.
Wow. Really? All the way below 8, huh?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I don't think, like, if all you knew about Pittsburgh was the last, so that's the hard thing. If all you knew about Pittsburgh was the first 2 months of 2020, obviously you'd have a different opinion. But if all you knew was the last month and a half of the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers, you would not consider them a good team. So I look at Big Ben. I mean, Big Ben's not even like assured of coming back. I would put it as an underdog that he's any good next year. An offense, they're probably going to lose Smith-Schuster, which makes it harder on everybody else. And, on defense, they're probably going to lose Bud Dupree, who, they have, I think it was 3 players with over 60 pressures, and they would have had another one if Dupree had played the whole year. Like, they're a defense that puts pressure on the quarterback, and it allows guys like Steven Nelson and Joe Hayden, and guys like that to play a lot better on the back end than I think that they actually are. And so, like, I just don't see it with Pittsburgh next year. I have them 3rd here, and I have them closer to Cincinnati than I have them to Cleveland.
Okay. I think so. I put 8. I could see this coming out at 8.5 and being one of the unders that we bet really early. Okay. They obviously won 12 games last year. They were 7-2 in 1-score games. That is going to regress. I could just tell you that right now.
In addition to everything else that could regress, like Big Ben.
Exactly.
I mean, Big Ben's simply not a good quarterback last year. Like, he'd have to, like, for him to have a season similar to Brady's this year, even he'd have to, like, he was worse than Brady was the previous year in New England, and New England wasn't working with anything. Whereas I think the stable of receivers that Pittsburgh has is pretty good. So I don't know, man. Over under number of Dwayne Haskins starts 2.5.
I will go under. I think he makes 2.
Okay. You think they just play out? Okay.
It's really hard for me to back Dwayne Haskins right now. Like, the work ethic thing, like, you're just not gonna make it. I'd love them to bring in a real quarterback. Don't you think Teddy Bridgewater could do a really solid job with the Steelers? I do.
Yeah, I think any team that emphasizes
is Teddy Bridgewater a improvement over Big Ben?
Yeah, I think any team that emphasizes a short passing game could benefit. Any team that emphasizes a short passing game with yards after the catch, whose quarterback currently sucks, could benefit from the acquisition of one Teddy Bridgewater.
By the way, the Steelers' win total last year was 9.5.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the Baltimore Ravens, whose win total last year was 11.5. We talked about betting the under. Everyone hated us. How could you hate the Ravens? We don't hate the Ravens. 11.5 is a huge number. It's a huge number. They ended up winning 11 games last year, which was kind of an upset. Had to really push the gas pedal down towards the end of the year. Okay, I struggled with this one quite a bit. I ended up at a flat 10. What did you have?
10.5.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think the Ravens are I think deservedly so well regarded in the NFL, right? And 10.5 is, if you put 10 out there, you're sort of, you're basically betting on Lamar Jackson not playing well, because they do everything else so well in Baltimore. They play special teams well that actually fell them in the playoffs, but they generally speaking play special teams well. Their defense is always, fairly good. They don't spend money where they don't need to. And I think that their problems are very acute. Find a way to get weapons to Lamar Jackson.
I wanted to assume that they signed Allen Robinson in making this. I honestly did, because I couldn't imagine them rolling out that same receiving core. It's sad, honestly. You to have the top two targets for Lamar Jackson be Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown is it's embarrassing. So I expect them to make a move there. I guess I just struggled with, for Lamar Jackson to continue to put the team on his back as a rusher requires them to continue to be, pretty solid up front. They're going to lose Orlando Brown, it looks like. We saw that regression this year. Ronnie Staley is going to be coming back from injury. So I don't know. That's why I put 10. That is the highest one that I have. They went 2-4 in one-score games last season, which I think was a little surprising given what we know about John Harbaugh. But
they had the tough one against the Steelers. The New England game was mostly weather induced, and then they had the overtime game against the Titans. The really only time they got blown out was Kansas City, and that was early in the season.
That was early in week 4, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the Browns here, because I have some questions about the Browns versus the Ravens. What did you have the Browns win total at?
I had the Browns win total at 9 flat.
Okay. See, I have this closer. Okay. I have them at 9.5. Mm-hmm. So the half win that you gave Baltimore, I am giving Cleveland. And okay, Cleveland went 7-3 in close games. That scared me off a little bit, but they were also 7th in EPA per pass play from week 8 on. And when I go and I look, everyone goes, okay, well, it's Kevin Stefanski and his offense. Yeah, but that offense is coming back next year.
Yeah.
And Baker Mayfield played really well from a clean pocket. He was top 7, I believe, in PFF grade per snap from a clean pocket. And look, for Lamar Jackson, he has the specialness with, his ability to create offense running the football. But they took a huge step back throwing the ball last year. And I don't know that it's immediately, they were 19th in EPA per pass play last season. So I don't know, man, part of me really wants to think of the Browns as a sneaky bet to win this division.
Yeah. The Browns season is interesting because they literally played 3 consecutive games where the passing data is unusable, right? Mm-hmm. Because the Oakland game that was in a monsoon, it was awful. Then they had the Houston game, which was windy. And then I want to say they had the Philadelphia game after that, which was, a little bit better, but still not one where, passing was, at even league minimum sort of conditions. So a lot of their data is weird. But I don't know, man. This is interesting. Is Stefanski a Nagy or is he a Dable? Is kind of my question here. If he's a Nagy, like, remember how much, fans of the Bears were convinced that Trubisky had it in 2018? And then 2019, Nagy basically said, hey, we're going to try to run an offense that's a little bit less quarterback friendly. I want to figure some things out about my QB. That's kind of the way I interpret it, obviously.
That is a low blow. That is a low blow. And I would not wish that on anybody. I did not think that was going to come out of your mouth, because I don't even think of them as being in the same stratosphere. I mean, Trubisky, but Trubisky was way worse than Mayfield was last year.
But if you do those graphs of like PFF grade versus EPA, like in 2018, Trubisky was like off the line by, like, his residual was humongous. There was a ton that they were doing to help him out. And whether that was because they lost weapons or they were less creative in 2019, it didn't happen. And, Dable, they obviously do good things for Josh Allen. They trust him a little bit. But the question I have is, okay, Mayfield had a good season last year. I thought he played great in the playoff game against Kansas City. I thought, he's had, but you remember watching opening day, we had them +8 or whatever it was. And
the guy got stoned.
The guy is still like fairly, like, his neck is fairly like fused in the pocket, right? Like, the guy doesn't like look off players. Like, I don't know, like, to me, I am just a little nervous. And again, like, this to me, and I don't want to insult anybody, but this 9 here, if it opened at 9.5, to me, I would take a flyer on it in the same way I took a flyer on the 19 Bears, and the same way I took a flyer on the 18 Jags. And again, I'm not putting Mayfield in that category, but I'm putting the situation in that category.
All right. This may be the one where we differ most. I have faith in Stefanski now. I don't have that much faith in Mayfield, and this was going to be my question. Both Mayfield and Jackson, you could extend them. We've talked about this before, but I want to revisit it. Are you extending either of those guys right now?
Not this cycle. The better, I think, and that's a great question. I think a deeper question might be, if they continue to play as their median performance in their career over 2021, do you extend them? Because I think the answer for me is yes on Lamar, no on Baker.
Baker's got a little bit of Jared Goff.
Yeah. Well, so does Lamar. Like, look, so does Lamar. I mean, let's not. I like Lamar. I think it's going to be hard for the Ravens to look at at players they're trying to sign, or players within their own organization, say, look, winning the MVP of the league is not good enough to get a contract extension with us. I think there's a huge difficulty in selling that move to the rest of the team. That being said, we've seen it happen, and we just saw those two quarterbacks, Wentz and Goff, traded this offseason. So it's a great question. I hope the Ravens do enough this offseason and they evolve enough on an offense to make the question about Lamar irrelevant. And I hope the Browns do the same thing with Baker. I hope Baker continues his ascent, because if you just take last year's stuff, Baker's got a shot, and that, to me, it's a great question. And I think that's what this division is, rife with.
It's what's going to decide this division, which one of them
in the future, for sure.
Yeah, is going to elevate their play. I mean, here's the one thing I will say about Baker Mayfield and the Browns situation is Baker Mayfield, his first 2 seasons, he had zero stability, right? Mm-hmm. Lamar has had a really stable organization to help him along. So I don't necessarily want to look at it in the way we normally look at it, which is okay, they're 3 years in, how have they done? Because Baker is learning a completely new thing. And for the Ravens, it's okay, now can we add the new element of throwing the football? It's going to be fascinating to watch. I guess I have slightly more faith in Mayfield and Stefanski as a duo than I did with Goff, but it's tricky, man. It's really tricky. I mean, let me ask you this. Which offense do you like better this year? The Browns offense with Mayfield and Stefanski, or the Ravens offense with Jackson and potentially adding a receiver somewhere?
I like the Browns.
I think I'm the same. That's the thing.
But the problem is, again, and this is the question about how much you like Stefanski, because What was the Browns win total 2 seasons ago? They literally put this one up first and before anybody else. It was 9, right?
Yep.
And
8.5 last year.
You know, the Browns are a public team. They were a sharp team when they were 0-16, right? Everybody bet them. Everybody lost their shirt betting them. ATS, you know, all those years. And that's why, like, look, if they hang at 9.5, I just, by my, religion, I have to take under. Like, I just have to. But I like Jarvis Landry is a great football player in that offense. They did some good things at tight end with Hooper and Bryant. Their offensive line rate, right? We had Ross Tucker on in the fall of 2019. He said, look, this team's not going to be good because they can't protect the quarterback. Yeah. And they went out and they got Conklin. They got the Alabama kid. And then, and then they got Wyatt Teller to be like one of the best guards in all football. Yep. And then, you know, in the backfield, they signed the cheap running back, and they're probably going to let the expensive one go. Like, I like everything the Browns are doing. But at the same time, like, it just, there's always these question marks about these quarterbacks who, when they hit the ground in the NFL, you're not quite sure. And some of them can emerge and be that guy. And that's really the question. Can Baker do that? And base rates would suggest no. But, you know, obviously we've seen it happen.
I am really tempted. I really want to bet the Browns to win this division plus 175. Okay, last one here. The Cincinnati Bengals. Last year, win total was 5.5. They went 1-4-1 in close games. What do you have them at this year?
6.5.
Same. And I could see. Here's the thing. I was going to put 7, and then I realized, look, Joe Burrow, like, there's a chance that he doesn't start the season. At the very least, I think he's going to be, you know, like, working his ass off to catch up, to be in shape to start the season. And then maybe it's a little bit of a slow start. But interestingly, depending on what their moves are this offseason, I could very much see them being a team that people jump on and love the over with, a la the Cardinals, for example.
Yeah. Yep. And that one barely got over, by the way. 8, where it was, I believe, 7.5 at, 7.5. You know, that the one question, but, you know, I think the bloom is off the rose for Kingsbury. Like, we had the same thing with Zach Taylor over here in our backyard, where it's like the guy's won like 6 games in 2 years. Like, you know, that this is really his fulcrum season. And we know the Bengals are loyal to people, but, you know, if they don't win 7 games or more this year, like, it's hard to imagine him coming back.
Let me tell you right now, Cincinnati. Okay, we gave you Penei Sewell in the mock draft. Be happy. You got lucky this year, not because Penei Sewell fell to you, but because no one hired Joe Brady to be their head coach.
Yeah, that's right.
And you will have an opportunity next year to do that. And that is how the Bengals move forward.
Here's a question. I'm trying to stir some things up here. My hometown, Minnesota Timberwolves, literally just fired Ryan Saunders, the son of Flip, who was the coach when I was a kid. Rest in peace, Flip. And they literally signed some guy off of the Raptors staff to he's their coach now. It's not like an interim thing. It's middle of the season. It's like, I read that, I'm like, what the living fuck is going on here? Like, it's just the classic Wolves thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do the Bengals do that this year? Like, we're in November, and the Bengals are
there's no way the Bengals are doing that.
But how cool would that? How funny would that be? It's like, welcome
are there rules against that?
2-7-1 Bengals taking on the and they just signed Brady to a 7-year deal to lure him off of Carolina mid-season.
Yeah, he leaves like a thief in the night or something.
Yeah. How great would that be?
I'd be incredible. I'm here for it. Look, this offseason is probably going to be the craziest offseason we've seen. I'm here for next season to be a crazy season. But I think the Bengals at some point have got to say, look, Zach Taylor, it turns out, was not the offensive wizard that we thought he was. We need someone here for Joe Burrow.
Which is strange because he got the contact high from Sean McVay.
Right. It's interesting because, LaFleur obviously got a much better situation. We'll see what solid, like the guys that are coming from those systems, the younger LaFleur going to New York. It'd be interesting to see how those offenses do.
We didn't even talk about the Salah, like in our mock. Salah got his Kittle at 8. Yep. And then he got his Debo / Ayuk in the late teens, or early 20s with Jamal Adams pick. Like, kind of a nice come up for your guy Salah.
Yeah, and now he's got Sammy D.
Sammy D and Teddy B. Let's put Teddy B on the team.
I like that. We'll battle. Okay, that was the podcast. We'll be back on Wednesday. We're gonna do some more guessing of the win totals. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys in March. Peace out.